Like if you're walking around at 300, like the likelihood that you're gonna feel perfect is highly unlikely, but still, the top end, dude, ridiculous. What's up guys, Derek, moreplates.com. Today we're going to be reacting to Simnett Nutrition. Apparently this guy's name is Derek as well. And he has his 10-year vegan testosterone results. So a bunch of people asked me to react to this, give my analysis of the blood work and whatnot, and see if this guy indeed has a reasonable hormone profile given his diet model. So let's get into it.
What's up everyone, welcome back to another video. My name is Derek from Simnett Nutrition, and today I'm going to be sharing with you my testosterone levels from a recent blood test that I had. So I'm going to try and keep this video short because I want this information to get out there. I want lots of people to see it, and I don't want you to have to search through like some 20-minute vlog to find the info that you're looking for. So what makes this relevant? I'm just a guy who had my testosterone tested. Well, as you probably saw from the thumbnail or from the title, I've been vegan for over 10 years now. So that means no meat, no dairy, no eggs, no fish, none of that for over 10 years. And there's this preconceived notion that's out there that men need to consume meat in order to have healthy testosterone levels. So we're gonna find out if that is true for me today.
Yeah, so obviously, a vegan diet model it's not like you can't gain muscle on it. And I have actually said in the past, out of context, I probably should have been more clear when I said it, that a vegan diet is, you can build muscle on it sufficiently, obviously. However, it often requires a bit more strategy around it and maybe less efficient. The majority of people are not going to understand how to implement it as effectively as a, like broad spectrum, balanced diet model. That's just like fairly well understood. Like most people know a piece of red meat, what can you get from that? Versus with a vegan diet, you may not even understand, like, where do I go for the most comprehensive sources of protein? What should I use to complement this food item? What should I use for making sure post-workout I'm getting enough, mTOR, etc. So for this guy saying, it's gonna show his testosterone levels presumably to prove that it's not bad, I highly doubt he's going to have like really negative results or anything like that, or else he'd probably, I don't know if he'd publish it to begin with. But my main thing that a lot of people don't really seem to consider is typically when you're comparing like vegan diet versus typically the polar opposite side of the spectrum that is used as the comparison diet model is carnivore. For some reason, there's not really a comparison like done in the middle. It's always the carnivore guys going after the vegans and the vegans going after the carnivores. What I can say with 100% certainty is the carnivore diet, and I've done a video on this before, is not the most conducive to optimal testosterone levels. Now that may sound insane considering a lot of the guys that do it notice a drastic increase in their total T levels, but if you saw the video I did a while ago, it was called Carnivore Diet Crushes Free Testosterone Levels or something like that. And when you go through some of the blood work of even like the veteran guys in the space who are like highly, very, very strong proponents of the diet model, you will see a disproportionate rise in sex hormone binding globulin, which then binds up a shit ton of their T and DHT, thus resulting in a disproportionate decrease in their free androgen index. So they end up with a low free testosterone level, even though they might have a total T of like 900. So it's like, just because you're producing more tests because of your awesome fucking sick diet, doesn't really matter when you have like no freely circulating androgens to actually get to target tissues and do what they're supposed to do. Rather, they're all bound to binding proteins. So for this, one thing I can speculate about is I doubt his SHBG is going to be as high as a carnivore. The reason being is because the implementation of carbohydrates, at least intermittently, is what is going to prevent that. And coincidentally enough, shortly after I published that video, it seemed like, and I doubt it was them like seeing my video and like figuring it out. I think they were just starting to like get the same idea from my video. Like they were coming to the same conclusion after seeing their blood work around the same time I had published my video, and shortly thereafter, they started implementing things like honey into their diet, intermittent use of carbohydrates in order to keep binding proteins in a reasonable level, not to have the hormone profile equivalent in binding protein quantity to that of a female, because that's what they were doing before. So the intermittent implementation of carbohydrates has been able to attenuate that to a decent extent, and these guys are realizing the carnivore diet, unfortunately, is not sustainable long-term without at least some intermittent cycling of carbohydrate consumption. So the vegan diet, though, the concern is not really as much the lack of carbohydrate implementation. Rather, it would be the lack of bioavailable B vitamins and things of this nature that either would warrant supplementation exogenously or have some sort of, you'd have to strategize your diet model a lot more to actually be able to choose which foods are going to get you to where you need in terms of your micronutrient intake. So in that regard, that's kind of the main thing that requires a little bit more oversight of the diet model, a little bit more, analysis into what is optimal in order to hit your target macro and micronutrient requirements and get that broad spectrum optimization in the diet model that he's chosen. So let's see if he has indeed accomplished that.
A few other factors that are relevant and I think are pretty interesting is the fact that I've eaten soy like almost every day for the past several years. So when I say I've had soy almost every single day, I haven't necessarily had like a huge chunk of tofu or something like that. Although I do love tofu and I love tempeh and I do eat it many times a week, but I also eat other forms of soy as well. I'll use miso in a lot of my sauces. Tamari is another one. I love edamame beans too. And I've also eaten flaxseed almost every day for the last several years. So these are two foods that are known to be high in phytoestrogens. And there seems to be a belief out there that these phytoestrogens are gonna have a negative effect on our testosterone.
So, as far as how that would work and the speculated mechanism by which they would do that, it's something that would work through estrogen receptor activation. When you have negative feedback in your HPTA to your hypothalamus saying you have a sufficient amount of estrogen, if you have these phytoestrogens above and beyond your endogenous aromatization to estradiol, your body, theoretically, by the logic of, the phytoestrogen, I guess like people who talk poorly of them, would be that you get estrogen receptor agonism. So it's activating estrogen receptors and basically telling your HPTA, we have enough estrogen, even though the estrogens coming in are from an exogenous source. And when you take in those phytoestrogens, theoretically, you have your bioidentical estradiol that you're normally producing from your testosterone aromatizing into estrogen. And then you have these phytoestrogens stacking on top and hitting more estrogen receptors, thereby telling HPTA, we don't need to produce as much testosterone because we have more than enough estrogen, theoretically lowering your testosterone production through artificially induced negative feedback, essentially. Does that actually happen in practical application, though? Does not really seem to be the case. So I don't know how relevant it really is or how concerning it actually is.
So surely if I've been eating these foods almost daily for the last decade, we should see the effects of it in the results of my tests. So we're gonna have a look here in a second and see if it does. Also, I am no spring chicken anymore. I'm 37 years old, and I think it's well known that our testosterone levels start to decline as we age. So it's just relevant because, I'm not like some 19-year-old with like off the chart testosterone levels. I'm a 37-year-old male, so that should come into effect as well. And I also want to make it clear that I have never taken any performance enhancing drugs, any steroids, any testosterone or SARMs or anything like that. Full natty bruh. So
who? I think it's Durian Ryder who says that. I don't know if this guy got that from Durian Ryder, but I'm pretty sure every video I've seen of him, he says that. That's like his catchphrase.
I know a lot of you are sitting there on the other side of the camera being like, yo, does this guy even lift? Like, what's he talking about? He's not on anything. Well, it's an accusation that I often get, and people often say, oh, this guy's eating, a vegan diet. There's no way that he could build any muscle unless he is taking something. So I just wanted to be clear, I have never taken anything, so that is not gonna affect these test results at all either. Like, I'm just a normal guy who works out hard and, tries to put on and keep a decent amount of muscle on him, but by no means am I trying to be a bodybuilder. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, so thinking that you need exogenous hormones to build, muscle on a vegan diet is definitely not the case. I think it just requires, like I said, a lot more oversight and understanding of your micronutrient intake and how these things are all going to complement each other, because it can be a lot easier to become deficient in things in a vegan diet if you're not very, very thorough in understanding what you're taking in. So that's my only, it's not really a criticism, it's just something to keep in mind if that's a diet model you'll be pursuing long term.
All right, so let's have a look at the results here.
And obviously it can be, certain things you might have to consume higher amounts of, or, consume little random things that will complement it in order to achieve those micronutrient needs that would otherwise be, like easier to achieve with like one food group of a, broad spectrum herbivore diet model. But again, it doesn't mean it cannot be done.
I did get a full panel blood test done. I'm still waiting on a few of the results from that, but I will be doing a video on that as well. And I think I'm actually gonna have one of my friends who is also a doctor come on here and talk about my results with me, because he's much more educated in these things than I am. So that should be really fun. So watch for that in an upcoming video. But without further ado, let's look at my testosterone levels. So this was done through Life Labs here in Canada for anyone that is curious. So the top number that we see is testosterone. This is total testosterone.
So as you can see here in Canada, the reference ranges, they use different units of measurement, and they use, interestingly enough, the reference ranges are a lot less favorable. They're very, very underwhelming in terms of how high they say your T should get in order to be a high functioning male. So 20.8 nanomoles per liter. What does that equate to in nanograms per deciliter, which most of you guys are probably far more familiar with? Well, 28.8 nanomoles per liter is only 830 nanograms per deciliter. Yes, so it is telling you that if you have a 28.8, if you have an 830 nanogram per deciliter test, anything above that, you're too high. If you have a 900, you are super physiological, according to Canadian metrics. If you have an 8.4, let's check out what 8.4 is. If you have a 242, then you are hypogonadal if you're under that, which is like pretty close to what they have in a lot of the US reference ranges, but which is fucking really low, by the way. Like if you're walking around at 300, like the likelihood that you're gonna feel perfect is highly unlikely, but still, the top end, dude, ridiculous. 28.8, fucking ridiculous in my opinion.
And the reference range is 8.4 to 28.8. So you can see I'm definitely in the upper end of the reference range. So this is the number that is usually most referenced when people talk about their testosterone levels. However, it is not the only important number. We have to consider many other things. So there's also something that you see at the very bottom that is called the sex hormone binding globulin. So I'm not trying to be a professional at this or anything. I'm not. I just know a little bit about it, and I'm going to share it with you guys because it helps to kind of decipher the results here. So sex hormone binding globulin is just a carrier protein that carries different hormones around our body, but it is not free testosterone that we can use. It is actually like bound up and not bioavailable for us. So this number is important because it shows how much testosterone is actually being bound. So I am 56.6 nanomoles per liter, and the reference range is 10 to 70. So
the reason why this is important to look at, well, I already described earlier kind of, the thing we see very, very often in the carnivore diet crowd who aren't, cyclically implementing carbohydrate consumption. But, there are a lot of things that can increase your SHBG levels, one being ketogenic diet models, fasting, intermittent fasting even. I'm not just talking about, like a 3-day fast or something. Stress, there's a lot of different things that can increase your SHBG. Estrogen, lots of shit. But if it's too high, like his is not too high, it's a little bit, on the high end. So the result of that is even though his total T is, like high normal, at least by Canadian metrics, his free T is not as ideal necessarily as it could be. Now, it's not bad by any means. And does he need to significantly change anything? Probably not. Everything seems to be pretty on point. However, the thing to note about the SHBG that can be problematic is sometimes people will haphazardly jump on TRT without even needing it based on their SHBG being high. Like there was a video I did not that long ago on Joshua Fluke, an individual who was experiencing hypogonadal symptoms despite his total T being high. So he had a high total T, went to an HRT clinic, told him, all the symptoms he had, blah, blah, blah. He had a high SHBG, and instead of looking at his diet and lifestyle in order to probably attenuate the issue, drop that SHBG into range by cyclically implementing a diet model and or lifestyle practices that bring those binding proteins back into where they should be, rather than, chronically doing a keto and intermittent fasting diet model that will eventually elevate that to unsustainably poor levels. Instead, he just jumped on TRT, and it was probably at their advisement because they said, oh, you have symptoms, jump on TRT, rather than a simple fix through his diet and lifestyle that probably could have fixed the problem without getting on exogenous hormones whatsoever. So this is something to note too, because sometimes you will go to these clinics and they will tell you need TRT, even when they see your total T is where it should be. So that is something to remember for yourself because you don't want to end up on a lifelong hormone treatment simply because somebody was not intelligent enough to describe to you how binding proteins work, and that you may actually be able to become symptom-free just by intervening with some very basic diet and lifestyle modifications.
Reference range is 10 to 70. So I'm in the upper end of that reference range as well. If I was lower, that would be better. But considering my testosterone is high and my sex hormone globulin is fairly high, that's okay. The problem would be if my testosterone was in the middle and my sex hormone globulin was like off the charts, or if my testosterone was low and my sex hormone binding globulin is where it is, that would be a problem. But we don't have to do the guesswork here to figure out if that's good or bad. They actually have some other numbers, some other calculations that they've done for us. So the next values we're going to look at is the testosterone free calculated. So this is getting a little bit more accurate as to what sort of testosterone I have in my body that I can actually use. So I am 388 picomoles per liter, and the reference range is 115 to 577. So I'm definitely in the middle to upper end of that reference range as well. And what this number is basically they take testosterone and the sex hormone binding globulin and they put it into some sort of formula and you get your free testosterone. The next values we're going to look at are the most accurate and the most important and the most representative of how much testosterone I actually have in my body that I can use. So this is what they call the bioavailable testosterone. And again, this is done through a calculation, and I'll explain that in a second, but you can see my number is 9.1 nanomoles per liter, and the reference range is between 2.7 and 13.5. So I'm definitely at the high end of that scale as well. So to calculate this, they actually take into account the free testosterone, which already takes into account total and sex hormone binding globulin, but they also take into account your albumin score, which has an effect on your bioavailable testosterone. So that's all been put into some sort of formula, and we get this number here. So
is a bioavailable, the only difference really, like the main difference between albumin and SHBG, obviously it's kind of, it would beg the question, like, what the fuck? Like, why is there two binding proteins that are causing different calculations and whatnot? Like, why do we even care about this number? Well, albumin bound testosterone is, like loosely bound. It's not, as aggressively bound as SHBG in layman's terms. It's like the best way I can describe it. So it becomes a lot more difficult to dissociate the androgen from the binding protein complex. We have SHBG, very, very tightly bound to DHT and lesser so to testosterone, but albumin is a bit more, like loosely bound. So it is considered into this bioavailable calculation, which could otherwise be something that is more available to tissues for delivery. And they have these different calculations. Most people just look at total, and free rather than bioavailable, but it seems like bioavailable is becoming more and more, requested, although many would probably deem it unnecessary or, less relevant to check, pending your total is decent and your free is decent as well, relative to your SHBG, and the proportion of free relative to total is in line and is not representative of insulin resistance and or, chronically, keto dieting or some shit, stuff like that.
So 9.1, and the reference range is 2.7 to 13.5. So there it is. Those are my testosterone results. And if you guys are using the excuse, oh, I don't want my test levels to drop, so that's why I'm not going plant-based, or that's why I'm not eating soy or flaxseed or whatever, you can put those worries away. And there was actually a recent study that was done, a huge meta-analysis that looked at over 41 previous studies and other meta-analysis that were done on the intake of soy isoflavones, which are the phytoestrogens from soy, and they found that they have no effect on testosterone levels. This was like the biggest study that's ever been done on it. So I know my results here are a personal anecdote, but it goes along with the science as well. However, you don't have to eat soy if you want to go plant-based. You don't have to eat flax seeds if you want to go plant-based or vegan. I mean, these foods are just two of the many foods that we can eat. However, I don't see any reason to limit these foods, and they're both extremely helpful, so that's why I eat them nearly daily. So hopefully that settles it for some of us. I'm sure some people will still not be convinced, but you don't need to eat meat in order to build muscle, in order to have good testosterone levels, in order to be manly, whatever it is, you don't need to eat meat dairy, any animal products to do it. So I think that's probably it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Definitely share this video if you have a skeptic in your life that's like, oh man, that soy's gonna turn you into a woman, or you're gonna get man boobs or whatever. Send this video to them, prove them wrong. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought of my test results and what you think my blood test results are gonna be like coming up. And I'm gonna give you guys a spoiler. They're not perfect. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Definitely hit the like button, subscribe so you can see more from me, and I'll see you soon in another video.
All right, yeah, so, talking about the estrogen, essentially this whole video is revolved around, is intaking, a vegan diet model, is it going to activate estrogen receptors to a, excessive degree that's going to cause negative feedback that will then lower your testosterone production? Does not seem to be the case. However, one thing I've come to realize, I don't know why I said however, it's not really a contradictory statement. I'm about to say something that agrees with that, is a lot of the blood work recently we've done on testosterone, which is a plant-derived ecdysteroid, we've also seen no negative feedback of the HPTA, which is kind of relevant to this because it's literally a direct estrogen receptor beta agonist. So something that would otherwise interact with the same receptor complex that testosterone aromatizing into estradiol does, that then provides that negative feedback to the HPTA. So the fact that we can actually agonize receptors without providing that negative feedback is kind of interesting, and it presents some interesting questions to follow up on. But this was a cool video for people who are wanting to follow this kind of a diet model and see that they're not getting into something that could otherwise be suboptimal for their androgen production. One thing I would, urge people to really look at though is the micronutrient intake, the bioavailable micronutrient intake. And in terms of, when it comes to muscle growth, things like leucine content and whatnot, these are things that I would, really look closely at when you are dissecting or designing your vegan diet, because that is one of the primary concerns, in my opinion, in terms of constructing something that's well thought out, well designed, is going to be the most optimal towards achieving your goals in a body composition context, and ensuring that you don't become deficient in some random thing that you otherwise may have been able to, you would have thought you'd easily have achieved through a normal balanced diet that is, something you wouldn't even consider that you need to then supplement with in a vegan diet, and or choose some obscure food to complement, or pick something that you just don't know exists. Just dig into it a little bit more, because it becomes a little bit more, requires a bit more thought put into your diet model when you are following this kind of a design, from what I've seen. So anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Anybody following a vegan diet here, what have your testosterone levels been like? And free testosterone levels, have you noticed any deleterious impact to your lipid parameters, any deleterious impact to your thyroid production? This is stuff I'm sure he's going to touch on in a follow-up video, but would be interesting to see anybody else who has before and afters they can kind of use as examples of what they experienced, what their feedback was and whatnot. And obviously everyone, even just your digestive system in general, your gut microbiome, everything is going to respond a little bit, differently in every individual. So it's not to say that just because one diet responds in one person horribly, another person couldn't, thrive on it. So I don't think anybody should 100% definitively throw any diet model completely out the window, because everyone has their own individual needs, their own individual response, their own individual genetics, epigenetic factors in their environment, stuff like that. So let me know what you guys think. Comments help the algorithm, much appreciated. Thank you guys for watching. Like, subscribe, check out my blog, moreplates.com. Follow me on Instagram at moreplates_moredates, Facebook, Snapchat, BitChute, Twitter, TikTok, Apple Podcasts. If you want to support the channel, you can check out anything I'm associated with in the video description below, including my recommended lab tests and diagnostics to check your hormone levels, my TRT clinic. It's all telemedicine from the comfort of your own home. And obviously don't haphazardly jump on TRT if you have something that can be resolved through natural means and you're not trying to get on TRT. Make sure you have somebody who has intelligence and high quality oversight to be able to explain your blood work interpretations for you, and will not just throw you on Clomid monotherapy or start injecting you with test simply because you have a high SHBG, and that's the easiest solution in their head because they can't fucking understand anything else like basic nutrition. So definitely keep that in mind, and anything else I'm associated with, it's all in the video description below. Thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.